the camera started rolling. They said, "Okay, welcome to the show," and it looked really cool. It looked
Okay.
kind of like this. Welcome to Revolutionary Speaking. My name is Rashad Barber, and today I have Key Jackson on the show, who is a community organizer. Has been in Madison for going on 3 years now, right?
Yep.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, could you give me a little bit more information, Key, with some of the organizing that you do around Madison, or what are a couple initiatives you're working on now?
Yeah. So most of my work is based in youth work. So a lot of it is working with youth of color on the west side, and then I also do some volunteering with Freedom Inc., which is a great organization. I think you've had Monica Adams from them on the show before.
Sure,
Yeah?
certainly. She
Cool.
was excellent.
She is
Yes.
excellent. She's an excellent organizer. So I work with her wife, actually. Keita runs a group called Black Beauties. So I volunteer and work with them. And then I have my teen leadership council that I do on the west side. And then recently was hired on to Gay Straight Alliance for Safe Schools as their Educational Justice Coalition organizer. So, which is a mouthful. It's the longest
that
title
was
ever.
a mouthful. Well, I think
EJCO.
EJCO.
This is still kind of long.
It sounds
but-
important, but it actually sounds like you're doing a lot of important things around town. I'm actually interested a little bit more with what are you doing with the Black Beauties, or going a little bit more in depth, some of the work or organizing that you do with these teenagers.
Yeah, sure. So, with Teen Leadership Council, something that's been in and out of existence on the west side, and then something that we were focusing on really heavily last year and continuing that. And Allie Brooks is a really amazing community organizer who does that group with me as well. So with Teen Leadership Council, we empower our youth to make decisions. So I'm less of like an advisor and more of just a support system for the youth. So they identify the issues that they want to work on. They set their agendas. They have their meetings. They plan their retreats. And I get to be along for the ride.
So it's empowerment. It's for youth of color? Is that correct?
Yep, it's predominantly for youth of color. Those
Okay.
are the youth that show up.
Great. And then, let's go a little bit more in details with, is that the same thing with Black Beauties, or is this different?
Black Beauties is also a group that's very much youth-centric and youth-empowered, and they actually, Freedom Inc., which I think is amazing and other organizations are starting to model, where they have youth organizers. So 2 of the youth from the core group of Black Beauties actually get paid to do organizing work. Right.
I wish I had that when I was a youth. I mean, I wasn't as active actually, but that's incredibly inspiring. I'm interested in hearing a little bit from you about the importance of having youth active. When I did this show initially, the impetus for me was to get more youth active. I felt like youth is always at the center of so many movements, and like they are the change that we're looking for. Oftentimes, they're a little bit more cognizant, or their perception of reality as it is today is different than past generations, because
Right.
they grew up more current with the more current situation. So it's always been an interest of mine. But as someone who does a lot of youth organizing, what kind of drew you to youth, and why do you think it's so important that we focus on youth empowerment and having them more active?
Yeah, I think so. We know that in the political landscape, youth are generally discounted as just not being motivated or not being informed or involved, when so many of the things that we as organizers look at and work on are really centered around youth. And so for me, I became politicized early in high school, and the experience of like being a low-income queer person of color, discovering what power could look like and what it could feel like, and discovering that I could take that power was something that I wanted to have available to the youth in the area. And they really are the heart of our community. And in any community, if you want to get to know people, if you get to know the youth, you're going to get to know the mothers and the fathers and the grandmothers and like the whole family. So yeah, I think that the youth voice is the voice to pay attention to.
Gosh, that makes me think so much about community organizing in general. Like, it sounds like you have access to the community by going through the youth. And like you said, they're oftentimes discounted because they don't have rights to vote or whatever reason. if they're deemed have legitimacy or maturity, but by actually organizing through them, not only you're setting the trends for tomorrow, but you kind of, like you said, you have access to their family or to their school, and so you're actually getting sometimes better access to a community or than what you may have otherwise.
Right, and it's our community, right? So these are the youth that I know and like come to love and work with, and I think especially in organizing, like as kind of our generation of organizers are starting to get older, like not that our stories are less important, but our experiences aren't as relevant as the
Sure.
experiences that our youth are going through or facing right now. So when I speak to folks, I speak less about the experiences that I had as a high schooler and more to the experiences that my youth are currently having. And that's what's real is my youth know they may not initially like have the language to say like this is internalized depression or this is what bullying looks like or all of these things, but they know that my teacher said that I should not study so hard because I was just going to end up being a janitor anyway. Like they see these disparities, they recognize that it's wrong, and they're actually living through it. Where I think that we speak to it a lot and have to be conscious of what we're speaking to versus what our experience is in the moment.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And then I guess I'm also interested in the whole process of working with the youth. What does empowerment look like? Or you said you were politicized when you were in high school, but when did you start to realize you have power? And how do you see that being transferred when you're working with the youth today?
Yeah, so for me, I lived in a really rural, agriculturally rich, smaller town where there's a really large migrant population. And so one of the things that I started realizing and noticing was around tuition equity, or what we call the DREAM Act, where like people, my peers, were getting 4.0s, but weren't making their college plans. I'm like, why aren't you doing this? I'm like, well, I would have to pay out-of-state tuition, and that's just ridiculous. It's impossible to do. So that was the first thing where I was like, this is messed up. I almost cursed on your show. We talked about that.
It flies. Go
it
ahead.
happens. Yeah, I was like, this is messed up. Why is this happening? And so started to organize around that, and then continued organizing around tuition equity in college, and got involved with the Oregon Students of Color Coalition, which was inspiring and empowering in and of itself to see a board made up of students of color, like across the spectrum of communities, saying these are the rights that we need to have. Here's how we're going to address them. Here's how we're fixing it, and actually affecting policy changes within a university system. So getting politicized that way, and just like having the experience and having somebody say, "Hey, you care about this. You should come to this meeting." So with my youth, it's whenever you work with youth, it's all about respect, right? So
Sure.
The first step is building the relationship and gaining their respect, and that comes from relatability. Like, I know what it's like to be on free and reduced lunch. Like, I know what it is to struggle. I know these things, so I can connect with my youth on these things. And beyond that, it's being able to listen and not over kind of inundate with information, which you see a lot of adults going into youth spaces and being like, here are all these statistics and here are all these facts. And they're like,
What you need to know, yeah.
right. So it's listening and then being able to help them shape conversations and draw out themes. And Teen Leadership Council and YES, which is another group, Youth Empowering Students, which is, they had no idea that YES, VOSES, an organization based out of Milwaukee, also has a YES group that passed the Student Bill of Rights, which is a major win for them. So it's the same name for the group, but our youth didn't know about VOSES Youth when they came up with their name. So we might have to talk about that. But they identified all of these issues of like, we don't have a voice. Pregnancy rates are skyrocketing. We don't feel safe in our neighborhoods, and started an anti-violence campaign which was totally based in social media. And they started working on their version of what a Student Bill of Rights would look like here in Madison. So
that's amazing.
Right.
That's really inspiring. And so are they seeing responses or community kind of showing, support, or like what has taken off since having?
Yeah, I think the community is behind the youth, and when I say community, I mean like the youth's community, right?
Okay.
So the community is behind the youth. I think that it's gonna continue to be a struggle when you have a large group of youth of color trying to do work in a predominantly white city. So those are obstacles that our youth recognize and are continuing to go up against.
Sure.
But their favorite is like action-based things. So around the election, they went out and rallied on the streets and had signs, please use your voice because we can't, or we don't have one.
Oh, wow.
And we're
That's
really
great.
informed about that. And they got 150 honks.
That's
So
awesome.
they're excited.
I need to have these guys on my show.
You should.
Yeah,
You should
at some
actually.
point. I'm sure that can be arranged.
They would take over.
Yeah, well, I'll see about that. I'm sure they would. I would be more than happy to let their voices shine. Let's move on to some of the work you're doing now with GSafe. You just got hired for an amazing position.
I did.
Congratulations.
Thank
You're
you.
so much more. I don't know. Like I look at you as being a professional, a very dignified, powerful person. So,
Really?
So it's just cool.
That's
It's just cool
interesting.
to see you in a position now where you might actually be able, where you can kind of continue that work and find new mediums to kind of share your voice. So yeah, let's speak a little bit about what is
GSafe?
this position with GSafe?
Well,
Or
GSafe-
what are some of your responsibilities as well?
Sure. So GSafe, Gay Straight Alliance for Safe Schools, has been in communication with a lot of organizations, and educational justice is something that a lot of youth-based organizations are working on. So we're putting together a coalition, just the Educational Justice Coalition, which the name may or may not change as we go. So my position is basically to not create the coalition itself, but to help do the nuts and bolts work of what does it take to create a coalition, how do we build those relationships, who are we building relationships with, who makes sense to pull on board, and making that happen, which with GSafe is interesting, and because GSafe is a mostly white organization, like I'm the only staff person of color, and getting hired on there, I was doing some anti-racism consulting for them. So they're an all-white organization that recognizes the fact that they're an all-white organization and are taking serious steps to being accountable to the community and wanting to become an anti-racist organization. So
Sure.
I think GSafe putting money into my position and making sure that this coalition happens is one of the ways that they're showing their change and kind of evolution. So the coalition part is mostly right now, it's going to be a lot of relationship building going into I'm hoping that we'll have our first coalition meeting in January, in the first few weeks in January. So it is exciting. I'm getting to meet with youth and adults.
Coalition with schools, organizations?
Organizations,
Or-
yeah,
okay.
with organizations. And one of the things, because it is around educational justice, we want to make sure that youth are equally represented within the coalition.
Okay.
So when we're looking at, like, Freedom Inc., for example, will be a member organization. We would have an adult representative and maybe 2 youth representatives.
Statewide.
Statewide.
Okay,
Yep.
this is statewide.
Yep, this is statewide.
Oh, very cool. So I know it's educational justice and coalition organizing. What's the educational justice aspect? I guess is it mainly anti-racism training, or does it go further?
So the educational justice piece of it is less something that's really finite or has been decided. So all of these different organizations have all of these issues that they've been working on for a long time. Like Voces Yes has been working on tuition equity in the DREAM Act for
Okay.
a long time. So those are aspects that could be incorporated. Urban Underground works on educational justice issues. Freedom Inc. obviously works on educational justice. GSafe in particular, we're working on gender identity and expression and getting that passed at the district level, added to the People Non-Discrimination Act.
Okay,
Sorry.
go further. I mean, no, go slower. Just because I feel like that is even just that concept is something worth discussing or exploring. Because I don't feel like many generations that I don't even know how conscious our younger generations are, but just in general, like that position with GSafe on gender issues.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? Like what are you trying to get past? I guess and like.
Sure. So gender identity and expression is.
And then I wanna sorry.
Okay.
Just because it's
Oh,
so cool.
did I mess it
there's
up?
a
Thank
line.
you. It's my gold line. Shad wanted to steal it, and then
I-
we had a conversation.
Yes, and I may have it by the end of the show.
It's probably not.
Because I like to take things from my guests.
Oh,
But
gonna
no,
happen.
going back to the the gender work that you're doing with GSafe.
So across the state of Wisconsin, gender identity and expression is not a protected status or something that's protected in like the People Non-Discrimination Act, and that's huge because we have a lot of trans youth who aren't feeling safe, or gender non-conforming youth who aren't feeling safe in their schools. Most schools don't have gender-neutral bathrooms, even at the university level.
So even when you say gender identity, what you mean is people that don't identify what we traditionally see as like male or female, or like just I'm trying to help I guess with who our audience as well.
Yeah, sorry. So and a lot of times confusion will come up around, isn't sexuality and gender identity the same thing? And so it's really not. So when we talk about sexuality, we're talking about like partners or who I could see myself spending my life with or just having sex with.
Sure.
And that is different than my gender identity and how I express that gender. So I was coined as a cisgendered person or a female woman at birth, and that feels okay to me. That's something that I'm comfortable with. So I'd be identified as cisgendered. There are folks who don't necessarily feel comfortable naming themselves across the gender spectrum, and there are folks who feel really comfortable placing themselves at either end of the gender spectrum. So it's making sure that protections are in place so everyone, right, all of our youth, all of our community have the ability to feel safe with something as simple as going to the bathroom if you're gender nonconforming, where you don't have a gender that you identify as your first one, having to choose, am I going into this bathroom that has a skirt stick person or a non-skirt stick person is an experience.
Sure, I see. So the educational justice work, or part of that work, is to try and get policies with the Anti-Discriminatory Act.
So with the
It's,
People Non-Discrimination Act.
Okay, and these policies would be so that there would be more options, or that it's just more protection, I guess, for people that are that may see themselves, I guess, fitting or not gender nonconforming. Is that correct?
Right. So
Okay.
it would be protecting gender identity and expression, like whatever spectrum that means.
Okay.
It would be adding protections.
I
for
guess,
that.
and so I guess what I'm looking also is like, what does that look like? Like, what would that actually be? Is that like having more bathrooms, or is that just having policies so that, people are not allowed to enter or like say something that might be demeaning, or how would, like, going beyond that, what would it actually look like in real life?
So I think it could look like a lot of things. Kind of the most immediate, tangible things would be looking like having gender-neutral bathrooms available for folks. But it also means that if a youth or person is being discriminated against based on their gender identity or expression, that there's a route for them to take. So, and these things aren't carved in stone, right? They're not, and it's not something that I think GSafe in and of itself would say, we know exactly how these things need to get carried out. It would be through working with the coalition and working with other organizations that are also doing the work,
Okay.
to kind of find out exactly how it would be carried out.
Yeah, I'm very interested to know how you found yourself organizing on these issues. Like, was it just a position that you had at GSafe that offering that you felt, okay, I should apply to this position, and this is something that works, I'll study up, or was it something you kind of have already been interested in before, and then found like, this fits me so well because I'm passionate to really get social justice in this area that does not have a lot of attention right now, or maybe it's gaining some, but it's not. It's obviously it still needs to work, and hence why you're in this position.
Yeah, so with gender, so I identify as a queer person. So with LGBT issues in general, or like I say queer issues, but not everyone's comfortable with the term queer, is something that I've been working on for a while. And so in Oregon, I worked for an organization called Basic Rights Oregon around marriage equality, and that included. And later, the organization worked on winning trans inclusive healthcare in Oregon, in Portland, Oregon. So working on queer issues, working on trans issues are things that I've done and things that are passionate because it affects my life and the people that I love.
Okay.
So, and with that, and even with that, it's with any other thing where you have to be aware of the space that you take and working on those things and knowing that I'm an ally to trans folks and I can't speak from a trans experience.
Sure.
But even within the queer community, I will say, like, you see a visible absence of trans voices in the queer community. I think that's something that we as a community need to be able to work on and organize around.
Sure. Yeah, I really, and so I guess since we're just on it and since we have a table on a book on the table.
Sorry, Sean.
The table's not on the book. I'm just curious, what's this? No, please show it because I'm sure other people might be curious too. What is this book? What's its title? And
so this is purely something that I have in my purse that I'm reading. It's not something that I brought on like specifically for you all to see.
But it fits. It does fit.
And I left
kind
it.
of. It's an interesting concept. I think it kind of fits a little bit with what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I just started reading it. I'm not an expert on this book. But The Left Hand of Darkness, I don't know where this is supposed to go, is a book. And it's a researcher that's gone to this planet who is kind of reporting back that that this race of folks who live on this planet are non-sexed, so they don't have an assigned gender, and instead they go through sexual cycles where they could develop in either direction. So there's no psychological or physiological habits that are assigned with either gender. They just are as they are.
I think I think it's interesting, and one reason that I wanted to hear about it is because I do think, like each person has certain traits, and we have certain qualities. So some are more masculine and some are more feminine, and the most balanced or developed people usually have some equal level or like better, they're composed of both qualities, or they can be composed of either or, but it's not necessarily deeming one as like being more superior over the other and kind of being more accepting of like the different qualities. And and of course there's some philosophies that actually believe that, if that people reincarnate or that come back as like, other genders or what have you, other versions. And so I think to me it's interesting because I heard it like when I was in New York. There was a trans lady that passed away in a fire at the house, and New York Times got a lot of heat from like the trans community and anti and the LGBT community, because in one of the articles that was written, they actually kind of were a little bit demeaning towards this trans lady and saying, a man in a man that dressed as a girl, or just saying things that were not very respectful, and it kind of was missing the whole point of someone just lost their life, and like, how do you see this person? And I heard a commentary from another trans lady who has done a lot of speaking around the country in many universities, and she was saying how it's such a struggle to like live this experience, and kind of like, when are we going to get to the point where we actually start to see people as people, like for their personality, and not have to categorize them or limit them to like what our limited perception or understanding of how we're supposed to be. So I just thought this was a very neat concept, the idea of like, these are a race of people that I guess are, that are just that they're just people, but can go either way, but that you get to know them or not, like they wouldn't, from my understanding, and obviously neither of us have read this book. We're
topic of conversation.
Speculating already. But like, I just think the idea of like having to get to know people for people, like character, and not by if they fit this mold or not, is an interesting concept.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we have to watch and be careful of what we're assigning. So I have to watch myself in what I attribute to be a masculine
trait,
right, or
sure.
a feminine trait, or what does a man act like, or what does a woman act like. And I think in the queer community, we navigate that as well, right? Because there's these classes of like you're a butch, you're a stud, you're a femme, you're STEM, all of these different things, and all of those categories dictate the way that you're supposed to act with each other. So I think it's a balance of being able to watch that, and I think that seeing people as people is a nice idea, but I also think that there's some power that we lose when we don't feel like we have the ability to kind of take that status or take what, like I'm proud of the fact that I'm a woman. I feel empowered being a woman, and what that definition of woman means for me, right? So I think that I don't know, that it just reminds me of the like, we don't see color, and that's
sure. No, I mean, I guess, and so for me, like, I think I do agree that, like, okay, and we were kind of having this conversation before the show that, like, I see myself as universalist first and foremost, but at the same time being realistic about the world we live in today, there are like certain like concepts or constructs that are very real. There are genders, and there are like there are ideas of race, and the actual effects of it are very real, and it's seen out so many ways that are actually, very can be very empowering, and it also can be very destructive depending on like who's using it or how it's being used. So I guess it's like, I think both like my the way I see myself as being universalist allows me to see, the fact that we are interconnected and we're kind of struggling through this movement together. But then my somewhat developing analysis of like the actual social and political reality we live in, there's definitely real ramifications due to like, race and these things, race, gender, religion, affiliation, what have you. Like, these things are very real in the sense that they are played out, and they work within institutions. So not necessarily denying that or saying that it's not something we should give attention to, but seeing that also that, like what if, like, we can, like, we work on making a more equal justice plating, but also what if we can see each other past, I guess, those arbitrary limitations of who we are.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to recognize and honor those limitations, right? And so when you said like struggling together, in my mind I'm like, we're not struggling together. Like, we're in very different places of struggling, right? If we look at communities and like in communities of color, like we struggle entirely differently than a white community struggles, and like those communities are separate.
I agree, and so I don't want to, and just because we're gonna run out of time.
I was like debate mode on your show.
This is
not what you wanted.
This is what we should be doing, but and we'll have plenty more time to do it again. Maybe we'll have you back for sure. This would be excellent. But just because there's no time, I'm gonna have to. What does revolutionary speaking mean to you?
That's
the
the
name
thing.
of my title, and
What does revolutionary speaking mean to you? Revolutionary speaking means to me that you are able to hold your power and speak that.
Okay, I like that. Very cool, and the timing is great.
Perfect. It's that you have to have a better send out than that.
What? I think that's an excellent.
Keep the revolution alive.
Yeah, keep the revolution. Viva la revolution. Actually, that is my send out.
Is
usually.
it? Okay.
Well, I switch it up. I'm still working on it.
Is that French?
Viva.
We're gonna work on that.
Well,